The world has plenty to say about young people, what they watch, what they fear, what they should become, but how often does anyone stop and actually listen? Because beneath all that noise, there are questions, ideas still taking shape, and signals worth paying attention to. The Signal Room is not a stage for perfect answers. It is a space to speak honestly, to disagree thoughtfully, and to ask what adults may have forgotten to ask. This is your pathway into the Signal Room, where the conversation begins with the people shaping what comes next.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this session as part of the inaugural season of the Horizon Foundational Dialogue Series. We've been exploring a foundational proposition in that culture is not just one aspect of society. It can't be siloed. It's part of everything we do, and it really shapes the societies we're in. It creates meaning. It helps us organize priority. And importantly, it helps us imagine futures as well. It's a very complex term. And I think arguably has many, many meanings to many different people. Arguably, it requires context and a situational analysis to really deeply understand it. And this is something that we're looking to do through the work that we're doing today. The conversation we are going to launch into is perhaps one of the most challenging questions that we face. What kind of world, what kind of culture are we creating now? And how are we preparing the next generation to inherit it? We know that in 2035, today's children will become the first generation to have spent their entire lives with environments changed by artificial intelligence, affected by algorithms and continuous digital connectivity. There are very few, even now, who know what it was like to live without an iPhone. But as all the attention is on technology, it's important to ask, are we forgetting a much more fundamental human question? As part of culture and the cultures we want to preserve and keep, what do we all need in order to flourish? And for those who are making key decisions, what responsibilities do they have, especially to the young people? Are we thinking about it hard enough? Are we listening carefully enough? Are we doing enough? I'm really privileged to be able to tell us all that we've been joined today by someone who spent much of her career helping bridge the worlds of science, health, education, and the arts in pursuit of precisely these questions and many more. Susan Magsamen is the founder and executive director of the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and co-director of the NeuroArts Blueprint. Through the work she oversees and the emerging youth voice on arts and a variety of extraordinary initiatives, she is helping to deepen our understanding of the essential role of art and culture. And with that, creativity, beauty, meaning, and how all these things interject to what we think and say the best ways of human flourishing might be. Susan, thank you so much for coming to speak to us and join and have a conversation with us today. It's wonderful to have you here. Just to start, and your work spans so many different sectors, and so you're working with so many different people. I don't know whether it's possible to give us a little overview of what you're doing, but if you could, that would be really wonderful.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. And it's really a warm pleasure to be here with you and to talk about what I think is such an important topic and in many ways an urgent topic. Gosh, okay, so what I've been up to. Well, let me first start by saying that when I turned 40, I sold a company called Curiosity Kits, which was an educational arts company for children. And we created projects, project-based learning in arts, science, and world cultures. And I had started it when I was in my 20s, and I really was at a crossroad. So I went to meet a woman named Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot at Harvard, who had written a book called The Third Chapter. and she said, yeah, come on up. Let's talk about it. I felt like I was at an intersection and wasn't sure, which way to go. There's this great film um, where you see this image all the time where it's a dirt road and it's 4 different ways. And you're standing in the middle. You're like, which way do I go? And I told her my dilemma. And she said, well, I can't tell you what to do, but what I can tell you is what I do. When my energy goes up, I move towards something. When my energy stands still, I contemplate. And when my energy wanes, I usually walk away. And that's how I've lived my life. So
Wonderful, wonderful.
for me, all of the things that I do really are around creative expression. And so it sounds like I'm spinning many plates, but they all set the same table. My work at Johns Hopkins is looking at art and evidence from many different purviews, including certainly academic, rigorous scholarship, but very importantly, lived experience and also artistic practice and the role that artists and the insights that artists bring to every situation. And in my mind, artists have always gotten there first, and the science is really catching up with the artists. And then importantly, Indigenous culture and thinking about the role of how we once lived, and in many cases, how we still live, where there isn't a word for art because it's really how we live our daily lives. And so that knowledge base is the work that I work with many others around the world to think about how that intersects and gets woven into youth mental health, creative well-being, education and learning. What does it really mean to learn? Thinking about community development, palliative care, disaster relief, working with people with intellectual differences or learning differences. And so what I very much do throughout my work is work on projects that use creative expression and aesthetic experiences to have impact. And that's just been my life really since I was a little girl, and realized that creative expression was something that was inherently human, and that it was really how we brought our full selves forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, wonderful, and I resonate with so much of what you're saying. That the word you used just now, impact. I think the impact of the work that goes on. Even though artists have known forever how important this work is, and as you say, done it without even really thinking. It's just been very natural. And with children, artistic expression is you don't have to ask them to be curious and play in the mud, and get their hands dirty, because that's what they do. I mean, I love that thing when you give a child a present and they're far more interested in the wrapping paper in the box than they are actually, the toy that's inside it. So I think there is that sort of innate thing that arts and creativity have always been in us as human beings. And it's how we've explored the world and understood the world. But this need for impact and proving impact, I think, is something that has become much more and more apparent to artists, to justify why they're doing what they're doing, which can, it can be very hard, because often they're being asked to use language and terms that don't come naturally to them. And I think that need to give hardcore evidence rather than say, but it feels wonderful. We all know it feels wonderful, but actually to prove it within the systems within which we operate at the moment does seem to be one of the biggest challenges.
I'm glad that you're bringing that up. I think that this is a very tip of the sword, or that edge that's so important to talk about. As I said, I think artists have always understood intuitively the power of creative expression. And for a long time in human history, that was revered. Doctors were also artists, were also philosophers. And I think over time, the siloing of fields and the siloing of attributes and characteristics of what it means to be a researcher versus an artist versus a doctor started to really segment. And you could probably look at the Age of Reason, when there was this rational mind that was very dominant in saying, well, show me the proof, show me the proof. And that, I think, created this ripple effect that took away artistic validation, but also mysticism, right? And this idea of awe and wonder. And if you kind of fast forward to where we are now, where very much we optimize for productivity, we are, checking the boxes, we are pushing human capacity, to stroke, to heart attack, to, health experiences that are totally human made, stress, anxiety, etc.
Yeah.
Technology's done nothing but advance that. And I think when you come back and you really look at this idea around understanding the way that the arts change our brains and bodies, and how that can be used in partnership with the artist, that's where I think the action is. I don't think, for me, it's not so much about justification, but about a deeper well that provides more information to be able to use in service of humanity. And it's a round table where I think science has ended up as a hierarchy, like go to the scientist is
Yeah.
the expert, the scientist is the truth. That is not true. It's a round table where artists and people with lived experience and researchers all should be at the same table on equal footing. And I think what happens is it gets shortcut to say, well, what's the proof? And I think there's, for me, I came from a very arts-based family, and I always wanted to understand why. And so I think why is a great question. Why is an arts question? But somehow we continue to sort of put it in, it's either this or it's that. And I think that artists and scientists have so much in common. Artists and people that study any kind of thing are curious people, and they're always
Absolutely.
looking at what's around the corner.
Yeah, that is. I mean, curiosity is absolutely at the heart of both of those areas. The scientist is driven because of their curiosity on something, as is the artist. So I think there is a very natural synergy. But as you say, the silos have sort of kind of taken them apart from each other, sadly.
And the policies, people, I think policy making happens at all levels. It happens in your home, it happens in your neighborhoods, it happens in your schools, it happens in your cities, your countries. But I think you made a really important point where there are so many things that we don't know how they work that become policy. And I think it's because of great need, and also influence, and also feeling. And so I'll give you a great example. We really don't know how depression medications work, how SSRIs work specifically. We don't really understand how psychedelics work. Some of the things that we know are counterintuitive to why they would even be prescribed. But there is a tremendous need to address depression and stress and anxiety and mental health. And so the industries that create compounds and drugs have a real policy perspective and a real push for that. The arts have not mobilized to show how the arts are equally valuable as a pillar of behavioral health for addressing anxiety, for addressing stress, for addressing depression every day as a go-to, maybe along with medication, maybe separate from medication. I think one of the things we're doing right now is really creating an infrastructure where the arts in all of its forms, for many purposes, is starting to come together to bring this collective knowledge to say that policy needs to be created so that it's sustainable, so that we can use these artists' beautiful work to really help with some of the most intractable problems that we're really addressing today.
It is. I mean, it's, yes. I mean, I think this area of our mental health and the breakdown within community There's a wonderful book I've recently read called Lost Connection by Johanna Hari, and you know, and it's saying, obviously the pharmaceutical companies, we don't not, they've had their, there's the moments when they're undoubtedly they have a role to play, but it's not the whole role by any shape of the imagination.
Right.
And the inclusion and the partnership and the balance between this sort of scientific and the medical side of things, and the artistic and the community and the societal side of things is so important. But it's what you can only measure what you can only control what you can measure, or whatever. But it's really difficult, and that magic sauce and that packaging of joy and kindness and care is a very hard one to put on a balance sheet.
I think it's happening, though. We're seeing it happen. And we pay for what we value. And so then I think it's important to explain what is true value.
Yeah.
So, and you can look at something like isolation and loneliness, and you can show the economic impact of isolation and loneliness. And you can also show the economic value of arts, integrated community arts work on a community that's been had a sense of loneliness and isolation. And so I think it's figuring out, what are those arguments that are worth really framing in a new and different way. And I think the partnerships are really important. I think partnerships with pharmacological interventions is important. I think partnerships with technology are important. And I want to say a little bit about that.
Yes, I think we will definitely need to go. We will undoubtedly in the world. We won't shy away from that discussion. I think that which I'm happy to go to now if you'd like to.
Well, just to say, and maybe there's more to add to this in conversation with you, but I think technology is an ethical issue of our time, is the ethical issue of our time, and there's a lot of yes and no's, but the horse has left the barn, and I think we have to figure out what is our relationship. And in part, the reason I think the arts are becoming even more important is because technology is asking us to look at what it means to be human. And what is it that we need? We're never going to keep up with the machines. Our brains are not wired. We are not machines, yet we've acted like we were. And so the first thing is, what does it mean to be human? And what do we need to be human? Creativity, curiosity, rest, imagination, intuition, all of these things that are fundamental human connection, community. The second thing is that, what do we want technology to do for us, not to us? And I think we have not asked that question from the time kids are little. It's really a bright, shiny object, and it is a kind of drug, right? We're now seeing that technology is addictive through a dopamine hit over and over again. And coming to terms with it as like any substance, how do we moderate it, whether it's food or drugs or gambling or sex? How do you learn to moderate behavior? And that's a hugely important piece. Some of the things that I think technology can do in service of humanity is expanding the rate of discovery and knowledge in a way that we can't possibly do in terms of AI and processing. And that's really interesting. I also think that some of the ways that we deliver the arts can use technology. I've seen virtual reality for pain management. I've seen things for stress and stroke. I've seen many kinds of integrations of technology into interventions that are really interesting. And the third piece is scaling. Something as simple as using Zoom to be able to help people with Parkinson's dance during COVID. Millions of people danced on Zoom during COVID. It's a very low-level form of dissemination, but to get that knowledge out, if you can't get to a dance studio or you can't get to a theater, it's really interesting. So again, I come back to, how do we make sure that technology is in service to us, not the other way around? And that is a big battle to fight.
Huge. And I think this is where there is a huge onus on us as the grown-ups in the room, so to speak, As I mentioned at the beginning, there are not many of us left standing who can remember what it was like not to be swamped by social media feeds and have the iPhone beeping away at us all the time. To children now, that's just a very normal, everyday environment. They obviously, understandably, know no different. So to sort of make the responsible, and you use the term ethical decisions that we now face, and to be, to have at the moment, I feel, with the rate of this, the technology through AI, sort of the explosion, this arms race that we are now witnessing, or I think you either get it related to an arms race, or a drug dealer mentality, that we're being fed, all of us are being fed addictive devices, and then they control the supply and then they raise the prices. It's sort of very much of a similar model. So I think to have the responsibility of those of us who can, to stand up against that and say, we know the horse has bolted, but we can work together to rein it in. We can't just accept it's gone, and act like it doesn't matter because it's gone. We can still get it back sensibly, and recognizing, as well as you say, that we're not saying no AI, because there are really important areas where clearly we're already seeing that can help us, and I'm sure that will only continue to advance. But I think it's always that balance, isn't it? And it's particularly going back to the responsibility we have to children and to young people and that generation, for us to and also back to the sort of the neurological aspects of your work, obviously, in terms of the fact that they don't have to have that tension and that grit and that challenge of trying to work something else, because they can just quickly hop on their phone and put something into ChatGPT and that will come out. It's done. It makes life, and we all love life being easy. I mean, no one, the pleasure principle is well known, but it's sort of, but actually what that does for their future development and indeed future societies, communities, and environments, I think we have to be very cautious of that and look at that scientifically.
I 100% agree. I just recently was talking with the singer Jewel. Do you know her? She's a American singer.
Okay.
She's an exhibition in Venice, a visual art exhibition, and I was saying, it's interesting. It's about mental health. It's about planetary health, and it's about the feminine. And I was trying to just understand the exhibition, and she said, she used the word that you just used. She talked about balance, and I should have said, and technology, and she's sort of making this weaving around this idea of harmony. And what does it mean to be in harmony when there is friction, right? So in music, there's synchronicity, and there's also atonal qualities. And she made this point that, you need them both, but they need to be in harmony. And that when things are out of harmony, like too much technology, not enough, creative expression and culture, there is a dissonance and we're out of balance, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think we have to strive for, is human balance. And you see it with planetary health, right? We are pushing against major corporations, governments, to say, no, without our planet, we can't exist, right? Yeah. We can't exist if technology drives everything. And so this human fragileness is everything. And at the same time, there's such a beauty in the human capacity to persevere and to make changes and to right the axis that's off tilt, right? And so I think I'm very hopeful and scared, but hopeful that humanity, as a collective, not the governments, not, the powerful, but that the collective really is coalescing and coming together. And that's what I think that the Age of Culture project is really looking to do, is to return to a new place, right? To return to this idea that art creates culture, culture creates community, and community creates humanity. And how do you balance that and create harmony with these huge forces that could take us down, right? That could really eliminate the human species. And that's not an overstatement. That is a absolute scenario that we're facing, whether it's planetary health or technology or mental health, that we're literally can't, our next generation can't function, can't thrive because they're so broken down. So they aren't existential, they're real threats.
Yeah, I mean, I sadly, I'd love to disagree with you, but I sadly can't. Which is, and I'm with, I think a lot of people, and I think it's particularly people who are working in the arts and culture sectors, because you do tend, and I hate to make great generalizations, but because obviously it's not just the arts and culture sector. Anyone who's got a sort of caring sense about them feels it. We are in such an extreme point. And and it feels, there does feel to be such tension, I mean, driven by politics, and the sort of the rupture clearly through technology, and the great inequalities that are going on through extreme wealth. The fact that we're having these conversations knowing that there is now a trillionaire is just, it's beyond ludicrous. It's that sense of where we're saying it's not all technology is bad. Some technologies, we just need to keep it in balance. And it's like, it's also not saying capitalism is bad, but extreme capitalism is clearly not functioning, and not serving communities and serving people, and particularly young people. It's clearly they are suffering. I mean, I think, my own kids, some of the conversations they have with me, I think, this is not a world that I want you to be, and this is not something that I want you to think this is a crazy film, not reality.
Yeah.
But I think that thing of the age of culture, as this project is to sort of try and harmonize. I love that word. Harmonize these things, sort of bring things kind of back. It's sort of almost like this ship that's in a terribly is lurching from side to side, and a massive storm. That we just need to sort of have that sort of central kilter, sort of central balance to sort of allow it to sort of steady the ship, so to speak. And not that everyone, I think it's really important, communities and arts and how we live. It's really important that we are different. Everyone, we don't all want to suddenly come out all the same,
No.
agreeing with each other. I mean, because then we've got another problem there, but it's it's just that sense of remembering, I suppose, what's really important, what we back to what you said earlier, what we truly value, and and how we work that through, and how we remind ourselves that still exists.
I love the word remembering. I love that word. I think if you really are able to go into your body and to feel the remembering of connection or of safety or calm or joy, if you can isolate those feelings and remember the importance of them, decisions change. And this is where in my work, I think a lot about this with the adults in the room. When you can sit policies aside for a moment and you can talk to someone about their child who is suffering from a mental health issue, or their parent who has Alzheimer's, or their wife who is struggling with breast cancer, it becomes very human, and we start to make different kinds of decisions. And I think that's the level of dialogue, of connective tissue, that we need to really harmonize. Because when you get into the fight, you're wrong, I'm right, nothing happens there because people don't want to step back. But when you really get into the gut, into the feeling, it changes. And with youth, we recently in my lab did a youth voice project, been over 2 years. We've
Mm.
been working with about 1,100 youth and their families. And we put
Yeah.
together a youth advisory board to guide this. And basically, we asked them, what their thoughts were about mental health. They don't like the term mental health because they don't think it's about health. They think it's about living. And secondly, we asked them, did they use any kinds of creative expressions or arts at all? Over 80% of them do. Over 60% of them do on a daily basis, which I think is extraordinary. And this could be as simple as doodling or writing something down. It turns out that music is the art form that they go to most often. And I think it's because it is instantaneous. Music and sound reaches you in just 3 milliseconds. The other sense that is so strong is smell, right? Because smell also has that sort of molecule
Trigger.
that triggers
Yeah.
you instantly, and it can bring you back to remembering. But they feel very strongly that creative expression is a necessity for not just dealing with the big problems, but the day-to-day. How do I feel about something? What is meaning making to me? How do I connect to somebody else? How do I really share myself in the deepest way? And so, as you said in the beginning, how young children, you don't have to tell them how to play. They show you because they do it. It's a being. I think children, these are children 11 to 24, are basically saying that we know what's right. We know what we need. You don't need to tell us what we need. What we need is for you to listen and to hear us, and to then accordingly make those changes in curriculum, make those changes in the community centers, make those changes in how you value me. And so we're working on this project where we're going to be releasing 4 different papers. They're more like thought pieces from youth, designed by youth, to really share their voice. And we're going to be pushing that out to all of the adults in the world to say, this is what I just want you to hear. And I very much see us as a conduit. I mean, at this stage in my life, I think the thing I can do for youth is connect, make meaningful connections, because youth know what they need. They just need to be heard. And so can I help in that connection of helping them share that voice? But youth really know what they need. We just need to be better at responding.
Yes, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I think that is one of the big drivers of the Signal Room project, which is part of what we're doing with the art of culture. And really, as you say, listening to young people. And there is there is research out there. Clearly, you've got some great research. I mean, there was a report just out in the Financial Times, talking about young people and what they're worrying about and what they're thinking about and what they're doing. And there's other, research that we've been involved in as well, through, looking at what boys are thinking, and how that sector is sort of really being impacted. And obviously, different research for different ages and different groups and different countries. But it is, I think it's that, the research is there and it's being done. And I think that is only good, and and more of that is good. But I think the most important to say is to listen to it and act on it. And recognize, and I think that's sometimes I wonder that we get this information, and I think the more we can share it and make people aware of the information, that's all brilliant. But it's how do we then get to the gatekeepers and the decision makers and the people who have cut the arts teachers in school and have closed the community centres and and have boarded up the parks. How do we it's sort of, we're back to looking inside, but we're also arguably almost, which is something I know no one likes to do in a growth economy, but going backwards to what we had before that we have drastically lost.
Yeah, I agree. The 2 points. One is that, and I think this first point, I can't stress enough how damaging it is. Youth are often asked how they feel and what they want, and then it's ignored. And
Yeah.
it's in that ignoring is a secondary trauma because they feel unseen, unvalued, and it's demoralizing. And I
Yeah.
think we do this huge injustice by asking how I can help and then not doing anything. And so you're the sort of stage from, knowing and then doing and acting, I think is also a place where youth need to be actively involved. There needs to be youth on city councils. There needs to be youth at the national levels within countries. There needs to be youth on advisory boards that are helping to say, no, this is what this needs to be. They need to be part of the decisions, not represented in the
Mm.
decision making. And I think we don't give youth enough credit. We don't create those opportunities for them to be in those places,
Yeah.
in those spaces. And that's something that, and then within schools, I do see um, more coalescing of the use of culture and arts and aesthetic experiences in learning, separate from technology. In New Jersey, in the United States, they're now bringing back in handwriting, for example. So because they are understanding that kids learn better when they're actually
Yeah.
using that hand,
Yeah.
that motor learning. And so this is where the science, I think, is actually helping policy. In California, there's a whole push for and money to be able to bring arts into every school and more arts into underrepresented schools. So I think there are things happening, but we continue to need to coalesce and learn from each other. And I think things happen at a hyper-local level. So when understanding what individual communities' problems are and how to bring that arts-based intervention forward or cultural-based intervention forward, is bringing those groups together is also really, really important. And really figuring out, what does success look like? What are the changes that really need to be made, and where are we on getting there? But I think we often state the problem a lot more than get focused on impact and on outcome and on deliverables, on how we really
Yeah.
make that shift.
Yeah.
And it's wind in your face, right? You're going up against some big issues that have been, in the United States. We took arts out of schools when Russia launched Sputnik, and we were like, oh, we just need math, science, engineering, and technology. And that totally changed the trajectory of our school system since the 70s. And so, so rewriting that really takes that same level of effort. And yeah, in our country now, we're going backwards in thinking about the role of education in general.
Yeah.
So, these are big headwinds is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the other thing is that, I often think, if you not that anyone follows a map these days, obviously, because we've all got sat nav, but if you take the wrong route, at some point you realize you're on the wrong road, or the wrong, you've gone the wrong way, the wrong path. And, if we were trying to get from A to B, we go, oh, sorry, we're on the wrong road. We need to go back. And that's something we do really normally as humans, individuals. So we accept that there are times when we make the wrong turn, but actually it's very hard, it seems, for us to accept that we've made the wrong decision on things and say, actually, we've tried that. Sadly, we thought it was going to be good. It's not. And actually, we'd be a lot better and better off in the long run if we go back now and have a rethink and really put our heads together as to where we should be going.
When you were talking earlier, I was thinking about that. And I think this comes down to behavior change. Like it's like, I think philosophically, you might even agree that you've made the wrong decision. Something doesn't feel good, but you don't really know how to make the change and how to change behaviors, little things that then become habits or behaviors or real full change, right? And I think that's a learning thing. Like I think we have to really remember that when you're making a change and you're doing something different and new, it's always going to be hard at first because you've never done it before. And so
Yeah.
how to, and then where do you get counsel? Where do you get help to be able to know what is the right change and how do you increase that behavior? I mean, I guess I would liken it to maybe exercise, right? People, want to exercise more. And they start off thinking, I just need to, run or whatever, and then it doesn't feel right. And so they stop because it hurts. And like, how do we build in this idea of behavior change so that it's a part of the process? It's not A to B. It's A requires all these small steps to get to B. And I don't think we break it down to really understand how hard it is to change behavior, not just views, but to change real behavior. Because, I think that we end up going back to what we know, right? We go back to what we're familiar with or how we're raised. And this change really requires risk, I think, too.
Yeah, and we I think when we're in sort of this, as has been described as this economic age, where everything is very much driven by finance and cost, and the risks of getting things wrong, make it very difficult for people to sort of admit that things have gone wrong. Although, I mean, when I sort of reflect on that, I always think it seems extraordinary, though, that we're in a moment in time where actually no one quite knows the direction. We think that AI is going to help us. No one quite knows how, and we're currently seeing, we seem to, the environmental debate seems to be very much drowned out, sadly, even though it should very much be at the fore. And the issues of, IP for artists particularly is a massive one, and the risks involved in terms of security and scams are massive, and the impact, as we've said already, on the technology shaping education for our young people and how that affects their brains. There's all these risks that we know we're taking, but the drivers for this, because of the economic age, that the potential for the financial return seems to be a very, very concerningly powerful force, pushing us all down in one direction.
Well, but what if none of those economic gains or civil society or viability of countries or cities, what if that was not possible without culture, without a foundational sense of connectivity and culture? And I think that's where there's a major argument to be made, is that without that sense of community and culture and coming home and feeling safe, renewal, a sense of efficacy and agency, none of those things can be possible. I think that's a really important argument to be made. And there's been some studies, the World Bank has done some studies talking about without culture, the economic growth is not possible. And I think there's probably needs to be more around that this fundamental sense of wholeness is essential if you're really going to have sustainability and growth. And I think that's something that we don't talk enough about either. We kind of gotten away from it, but the kids are telling us that, we're hearing it, but how we frame it on the global stage is also going to be really important. And that's another reason why I think this project is so important, is it's coming back to what we know to be fundamentally human. And that's essential. And so I think that's the argument that we need to make. It's not this or that. It's that without this, you can't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, the essence of what is fundamentally human is so important. And we are not machines. I think you mentioned that earlier. We shouldn't be treated like widgets. We shouldn't be ignored. And the power of culture and through that, all the different forms of artistic expression that enable us to communicate and share what we're feeling. I think it goes back to that sort of how do we know intuitively, we know that we value that. Intuitively, we can feel that. And it's just working together to, I suppose, create enough of, a network and connections. And through these sort of conversations, through the research that you're doing, and through the research and the projects that we're also hoping to, which, we're hopefully be very much collaborating on. No one working from a top down, but everyone sort of networking and supporting and sharing each other with a very, a very open and heartfelt kindness, in knowing that we're all in this together.
Don't you want that? I mean, that when you say that, like my shoulders come down, I breathe better. I use this term called small is beautiful. And I learned it from a guy named Emmanuel Pratt in Chicago. He started something called Sweetwater Foundation, where he basically built a barn in the middle of Southside Chicago and started planting vegetables. And the community started to come. Then he had a band play, and then they started making art, and the community just grew and grew and grew and grew. And I went to visit him, and I said, this is great, but how are you going to scale this? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, how do other people do that? How does this get bigger? And he said, small is beautiful. And he said, when you have something that's deep and strong in a community, and another community picks it up and takes it, and they do it, and then another community does it, and another community, only the way that community can do, when you connect them together, you have a network, you have something big. And I think there are billions and billions and billions of people around the world that want exactly to feel the way you just made me feel, and to feel wanted, to feel safe, to feel connected, to feel part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that's what this network really ultimately does. I do this thing, my husband thinks it's crazy, but we go into the grocery store, and I don't do it all the time, but I should. And I make it a point to smile at people when I catch their eye. And
yeah.
I also will ask them, if they're looking at a flower, I'll say, oh, I'm thinking about buying a flower. What do you think about what blah, 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 or, oh, I'm thinking about this cheese. Do you think that's the right cheese? And what I find is that at first they look at you like you're crazy. And then they answer your question, and they have something to say, and it becomes an easy conversation, and you feel connected in this place where it's probably one of the most lonely places in the world, where nobody talks to each other at the grocery store, which I don't understand, because you're buying food for gathering, right? You're buying food for eating.
Absolutely.
And the guy that sells the fish, I asked him all these fish questions, and it's extraordinary how you can build community and culture just by smiling. And I think that's the power of this.
I agree with you so much. And the power of the smile. I bored my husband for this. I've not bored him. I think he's quite intrigued by it as well. But that the sense you get when you walk past someone and you smile at each other. Even just walking on the street, just to have that connection of smile, and you feel it in here. And it lift, even we all know that how your body moves with lifting your lips up to smile. It makes yourself feel better, but connecting with someone else, and that network that you talked about, and through this sort of work and these explorations and conversations that we're having, be it about the fish or world culture. But I think there was it reminded me of this beautiful analogy, I think, which is very relevant for what you're talking about, Susan. That they were trying to understand, swallows when they move in their bird formation, and scientists actually had studied for a very long time trying to understand, was it through sort of telepathic communication, that they were able to sort of know how each other were flying. How come they didn't all bash into each other? You know, how did this mass of birds work and get together? And anyway, and it actually came down to a mathematician, I believe, was studying it to create a computer model, actually, I think in the 60s. And he realized that actually what each swallow was doing was relating only to their immediate neighbors, but then their immediate neighbors were then relating to their immediate neighbors. And what it created was this extraordinarily beautiful movement, of, you know, piece of art, really, when you're looking at it. I mean, it's a wonder.
Murmurations.
Exactly.
Murmuration.
Exactly.
Yep, we need to murmurate.
And we need to murmur more and create those murmurs which will last, be that through smiles, conversations, and
it's
talking
so
to people.
easy. It's low energy. I mean, and it changes the energy. I mean, that's the other thing about energy and space, is we're always in a space.
Yeah.
And so what energy do we bring to that space?
Exactly.
How our energy can shift other spaces, and other people's energy can shift our space. And so there's so much power in that. And when you remember that,
it's so simple, and it costs us nothing.
Exactly.
And you know, I think it's talking about doing it from, you know, inside our, you know, our inner being, our core, our gut, our heart, our minds, you know, I think that is what humanity and culture is all about, albeit the different shapes it takes. And I think very much speaks to the work that you're doing, and particularly, as I say, our interest, you know, in terms of supporting young people in terms of how they flourish and inhabit this world and the spaces that we're creating for them. This conversation has left me feeling very, very hopeful, that you know, there are, you know, it's lovely when you're reminded of all the amazing and brilliant and good people in the world who are doing amazing work. Susan, I wish we could talk for longer and longer, but I expect I'm going to get a call soon to say that we can have gone over our time slot, so I will have to bring us to a close. But I hope this is just the start of the conversation, and connection points that we can grow and build together. And because, you know, I think you know, what we can do to support people near and far is just tremendous. So thank you so much for being part of this and giving up your time to speak to us today. It's been really good.
Really, and I love what you're doing. I'm so supportive of it. And you know, Paul Schaefer, who has really been a touch point for me.
Wonderful.
It's been such an honor to really watch his scholarship have such impact. And so it's really, on many fronts, I'm just really excited to be part of this. And I'm hopeful too. I am so hopeful. And I'm sincerely, I believe that it takes one person to keep passing this on. And that's doable. That's very doable.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's be like the swallows. Let's do more murmuring.
I love it. I love it.
Susan, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you very much.